Okay, we're still looking at the book of Daniel. I'm gonna try to make this the last one. There were some things that I wanted to talk to you a little bit further about. There was something that I said about the Ashurbanipal law code that I wanted to clarify a little further, because usually I talk about it in the sense of the Hammurabi Stela, which is where the civil law code is recorded. But it does have merit in the way in which I spoke it. I just want to give you a little more information in case you became a little confused. It's the same civil law code that we've been talking about that's on the Iraqi dinar, and we'll get to that in a moment. All right, coming back to Daniel chapter 4, when we are looking at this mighty ancient king known as Nebuchadnezzar. And there was something here in verse 15 that I wanted to clarify further, and that was going to be the band of iron and brass. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass and the tender grass of the field. Okay. Now, you should be able to see Great Seal of the United States, and then what do we have around here in bands? Black and yellow. That would be iron and brass. Now, most of you already know what those colors really mean. They stand for Dan. They stand for Dan is the bee. And then if you read Judges chapter 14, verse 14, and read Samson's riddle, you'll see he's talking about honey. And you'll also see in the chapter 14 and a few other verses above that he starts talking about a swarm of bees coming out of the carcass of a lion. All right, well, you know the lion that we are referring, at least in the potential of the understanding of the fulfillment of Jesus Christ, as the Lion of Judah. Now, you've got to realize there's always been a faction of the sons of God that have always represented the truth of the Paradise Father, and as a result knew the truth of the Eternal Son Creator. So there's a lot of stuff that's gone on in the past between the wars of supposed gods and men that are really more or less connected to the wars between the sons of God themselves. And then, of course, the peoples that they had befriended. You know, the fallen sons of God had actually made it into a stock of peoples. But the unfallen sons of God did not breed with the peoples, but yet they did work with them and teach them and help to protect them. And then we get some major confusion when Israel is ordered to start killing every man, woman, and child of supposed giant stock. That story does not pan out. And it has major deception behind it, and that deception is wrapped all up in this red hair conspiracy that's going on that I'm going to maybe talk a little bit about later in this video, but without a doubt I'm going to do some more on it, and it's going to open that thing up like you've never seen. Just go ahead and wait for that. So you should be able to see here Ephraim's symbol, the great eagle, Rev 12, lifting them up, breaking the seal after the second cup. As I said, with the second cup breaking, you know that the Dans are also known as donkeys, wild asses. More importantly, a specific type of wild ass, which it should translate back to onager. And then this is where we get the word ogre from. And then I'm telling you that this particular wild ass donkey is translating back to onager. Now, what have they shown you just recently in animation, pretty popular on the movie? They showed you an ogre that was running around with a donkey, Shrek, who inherits some kingdom, right? All right, it's all the same stuff. Don't take me lightly. So we have the Dans being considered wild asses and donkeys. Well, they're considered a lot of things. Serpents, bees, But my point is, with the onager will tell you the significance with the Dans appearing after the second cup. Now keep in mind, I've told you that they're going to send a deception of the Dans first, and they will be red-haired. They're going to try to fulfill that right there with those hamburger serving clowns. But what I want you to understand is that the true Dans are going to be blue-eyed and blonde-haired. Of course, because we're dealing with a white and black checkerboard, not the red and black checkerboard. It's the white and black checkerboard. So as you know, they're always dealing in polarities and oppositions. It ain't going to be no red-headed Dans that are going to be what they're hoping as the true. It will be the deception that they send first to trick everyone else with these red-haired Dans that is going to link up with a deception in history that is in line with the Sumerian peoples of 4,000 to 6,000 years ago being recorded as having red hair and were very tall. All right, but we'll talk more about that later, but that should give you and anybody else that kind of knows, or people that might even be studying me, I'll give you enough information where you know I know what I'm talking about. All right, so the onager thing, if you were to read the translation of that, the onagers are very particular. They are associated with the destruction of cities. This is why I said this is very important. It tells you about the second cup as being a portion of breaking the seal to release and birth things. Now keep in mind, we know that the Dans are going to religion. They're going to actually work against Israel in the end. How soon they do this, I'm not yet sure, but I do have a good idea through some recent verses that I've been looking into here a little further. But by understanding the nature of the definition of an onager, a wild ass, a Don key, is that they can only enter into the cities once the cities have been utterly destroyed, desolate, or in ruins, right? That's pretty interesting, because that's exactly what you see in Isaiah chapter 34, that the city is laid waste and desolate, and then of course they all come down and try to inherit it. The unicorns with the bulls. Now you know the Dans would also be symbolized with the bulls, more importantly the descendancy of the chief bulls, the Anunnaki, and that's why you have the Dans as an anagram for DNA. So just to give you the clue with the Great Seal as having to be broken to release the Dans, now you see what the color of yellow and black is all about. In reference to Judges chapter 14, which I'd like to keep this video a little more simple right now, so you've probably seen it in my other videos, or feel free to look at it yourself. Judges chapter 14, verse 14, bees, honey, death of lions, riddles, the whole nine. The whole nine. Riddles about serpents. Alright, so now let's look at this, and you can see what it's going to break down from, and we can also gain a perspective further viewing this as a historical artifact, which is actually kind of recording a glimpse into this history that we can view in a particular way after we understand something here. Chapter 4, the book of Daniel. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass. Now, as I said, that would be this hell place. Okay, but it's being quoted here as really not too bad of a place, to tell you the truth. And then the spirits that are actually preserved, the only thing that really happens to them is that they just don't sleep, and they're conscious throughout their whole time, waiting for this judgment to come, to the consummation of their crimes to come to the full. And they don't experience food or water, and that's an expression of the withdrawal of the sustenances of life in general, the experience of life. Yes, spiritual sustenance, but the experience of experiencing life, the fulfillment of living, is taken from them, but yet they're still in an awakened state, going through the grueling affair of wading through all this second by second for it to come a close. All right, that's the spirit portion that's been sealed. So we have a living descendancy also that is living and then producing more. Passes. So when their spirits pass after they're maintaining a living descendancy underneath the earth, when their spirits pass, they cannot go back to heaven. Because as you know, Jesus Christ, the apostles and others have already proclaimed that we are to judge them. Okay? And also it declares that it must reach a consummation. The fullness of their crimes must come to a close before they can be readmitted. So what we see is that the prophets and others and seers look into the future and see this taking place. They see the restoration of all flesh through the proclamation of Jesus Christ. So if you have these living descendancies that are living and dying, the book of Enoch clarifies, that they will not be readmitted back to heaven. They have to be stored somewhere. And then this is what this legend of hell become more associated with this fire and this heat. Because as I said, the spirit entities were maintained in a desert-like estate. And that would be that dry crystal-like estate within the crystal, void of the sustenances, fulfillments, and experience of life. All right, so there's a two-portion part that is being referred as being left in the earth. All have come from this original great tree, or great trees, more importantly. So the stump of his roots in the earth, those would be the original Anunnaki, who Enoch would quote with names such as Samyeza, etc. All right. So the original stump of his roots in the earth, there's going to be a remnant. The original first portion of them, the root of them, is going to be left in the earth. And then we see a descendancy of them will then be maintained under the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field. So this iron and brass is what? Well, it's the two colors now that make up the colors for Dan that are closely associated with the bee, yellow and black. So black is obviously the band of iron, and yellow is obviously the band of brass. But why? Why is it like that? Well, for the simple fact that iron is black and that brass is yellow, at least for the color portion of it. Now the history portion of it would go like this. We go back to chapter 2 of the book of Daniel, and we read here at verse 43. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with murry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. All right, so we're seeing this iron mixing itself with this murry clay. Now you should know that iron stands for strength, strong. Also, it has now been more or less evolved into and from, vice versa, Orion. Okay, and then of course we've got the pyramids that are aligned with Orion's belt. And if you remember something I've told you before a few times dealing with Ezekiel chapter 19, if you read it for yourself, you'll find out that this is the location for one of the sealing places of the spirits of these beings that we're talking about right now. And that would associate why the pyramid is connected with a band of Orion or iron. Now you go look out front of the pyramid and you see a sphinx. And a sphinx is a beast. It is a unification of two or more creatures. In this case, man and a lion. How would that be? Well, it would be unification of the sons of God with the daughters of men. because not only were they symbolized as serpents and bulls, but before the rebellion, they were more importantly symbolized as lions, because they were still a part of the original trust of this world. And of course, they were coming to a primitive world in a savage-like state. You would get the expression king of the jungle. They were mighty, they were strong, they were equipped to handle what this world had to offer in its roughness. But of course, we know that they fell. And they fell to lust, amongst many other things. So this is how all of this begins to come together. So now the Sphinx is showing you it's the symbol for what those three pyramids are built for, what they represent, who they represent. And you have to understand something, friends. They are about 80% quartzite crystal. If I remember correctly, I think that at least the main Giza pyramid is about 80% quartzite, and we know that Enoch records them as being maintained in crystal, and then more importantly, being maintained with sharp, pointy, hurled stones atop them. Is not a pyramid hurled, pointy, sharp stone? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I don't know who you want to listen to, but you can listen to somebody that is an actual true seer that really knows the connections here that are relevant and for real, and how they connect to the other portion of truth, not just some other old lie that's kicked around before your face over and over again. This is real stuff that you ain't going to hear nowhere else, only by people that are shadow following me and then trying to distort this stuff. You might want to come to the source. And I hate sometimes that I might sound a little more just too blank sometimes and to the point here, but you know, we don't have much time. I really need people to understand that what is being taught here is what you need to understand if you plan on surviving and helping other people understand, and then defeating this with a supreme confidence of faith, the very same confidence I got. All right, so now let's look into this. The iron has now broken the rule, okay? Not supposed to. It's broken the rule. It's rebelled, all right? And it has mixed itself. Now, keep in mind, this is that deception, too, with the gray aliens that are connected to that, all that, what we'll call it, underground propaganda with gray aliens and Orion. It's all BS. All BS. Gray aliens ain't coming from Orion. They're being made right here. They're bioengineered, and they are workers that can go amongst our world because they're not sealed. They don't have a soul. Therefore, they're not connected to the void or the prohibition of the seal. They supersede that with android-like technology, and these beings can collect, watch, and perform tasks for these people that are sealed under the earth. All right, don't fall for that crap. All right, what we're talking about is the Dans being connected to Orion, those blonde-haired, blue-eyed individuals that the Lord of the Rings is going to show you as elves that are going to the undying lands. And that would be Karanugi, that would be the underworld, that would be Sheol, that would be good old hell, that these men are trying to foist upon you as some sort of myth of pitchforks, cauldrons, and fire and BS. Plain and simple. And it's just a little too far in the future for that kind of crap to continue, if you ask me. And if you don't want to be seen as some sort of retard, as some sort of person that's being taken advantage of, some sort of golem, some sort of gullible person, then, don't fall for that crap any longer. Realize you have a loving Father, a loving Creator, who is going to be fair and merciful, and then there is no place in the world that could be upheld as a torturous place for eternity for the children of God, regardless of the mistakes they made. It's the torture they experience themselves from being separated. But as we know, He does not allot that to the kingdoms of men. When they go into the dust, they sleep. Biblical fact. Can you show me where I'm wrong, warning the people? Can you show me where I'm wrong? Robert Light, can you show me where I'm wrong? Jan, can you show me where I'm wrong? Mick Fox Bat. I'm sure y'all can post a bunch of scriptures, but when it comes down to actually talking about this and showing you the connections that it makes with Jesus' words precisely, you can't do it. And I wish there was more of you that would, could, and did. You know? I really do. So the iron is now going to be these sons of God, these original sons of God. Those lived a material life before. All right, I think some information got missed there that was important. So these ones are not from Orion, okay? We're talking about the mighty sons of God, those from heaven to earth they came. But it's not the physical heaven that they came from. They had already come from the inherited spiritual estate that you saw Nebuchadnezzar realize that he was about to re-inherit in trust once he passes beyond the seal and goes back to the spiritual estate, just as Enoch clarified could happen for them until the consummation of their crimes come to the full. Okay? So this iron is really not from Orion. And then the deception wants you to believe that. They actually come from a spiritual estate, but had lived a material life, just like us. But then they had already gone to heaven, and then eventually were chosen or elected to be rematerialized and come back into material form and help to bring this world into a spiritual truth that they, of course, rebelled. And that happens from time to time if you're dealing with free will. But it also makes the universe that much more challenging, that much more invigorating, that much more intrinsically needed for the deity personification that's been created to rule it to have some sort of experience of growth to overcome. If everything was running hunky-dory precisely perfectly, the universe itself would not be a progressive evolution of creatures learning how to take over their own inheritancy. That's how it works. So just like if you're going to be divine, you have to have the prerogative to enact your divinity over to. You can't enact divinity over into a perfect paradise. You can only experience that. But to enact the divinity prerogative, to get the experience that's going to lead you into eternity of perfection, you need an evolving, progressive universe to enact that in. Does that make sense to you? So these sons of God had lived a material life, elected the spirit world, had followed the leading of the eternal Son, were exalted in heaven, fulfilled themselves in universe service, and then were elected to come back down here into the physical to help a lowly material world known as Earth see the light. And this iron succumbed. A portion of this iron rebelled. They broke the rule. They mixed with the clay. Not only did they mix with the clay, but they just chose to mix with the Murray clay. The Murray means muddy, means dirty, relates to whore. Whores are dirty. Whores are dirty because they were seen as whores by the other side of the perception of the people that knew that these fallen sons of God had rebelled. Because, of course, there were sons of God that did not rebel, that were still considered the true sons of light. They were doing things much differently, and they weren't so flashy. And they were not mingling with the sons of men sexually, but spiritually, how it was supposed to be done. So they knew what the truth was, and they could see what the truth wasn't when their own kind were beginning to become sexually aroused by the temptation of joining this wicked faction in union to produce. So that would be the meaning of Murray clay, means dirty clay. It means dirty women. All those that were chosen of the daughters of men, of which they thought were fair, making them white and ruddy virgins. These virgins now became, by default, muddy and dirty, mingling with the sons of darkness. No longer was the potential bride to be wearing white raiment. She was now wearing soiled and filthy rags, and all those that come after her following have the same filthy rags. Just as we see Moses, just as we see all of them. It's hard to be clean when you're wallowing in the mud. And then they want to call us pigs, when in all actuality, it's the pigs that wallow in the mud. But I call no one a pig. I call all my brother, my sister, my friend. I just need you to see. But are you gonna be able to handle it from me? Most of you probably cannot, because all of our egos are already all so twisted up with so much pride and resentment for particular things that other people do. We don't realize that it's not about the people themselves, it's about the message they bring. It's the message I bring. Forget about me and realize that this message is looking for whatever way possible to get out there to you. It can go through anyone who's capable of handling it and has the faith to produce the fruit. Why is it happening to you? It's a question you might have had to ask yourself for the last 41 years. I don't know. So, my friend, the Murray clay, once it mixes, the Murray clay has no status as of yet, is my point, until it joins the iron. And once it joins the iron, then it produces the brass. Then it produces the top brass. More importantly, the top military brass. Okay? Brass, top brass is a common phrase for military high rank authority. And as you know, these ancient kings were all militant kings. They used force, military force, to gain land, to uphold their kingdom, to impose their rule. The very same force kingdoms that we see still in rule to this day. So this is what fulfills the truth in such a way where it's described, to he who has even more shall be given. Well, I had faith, and with this faith more is given to me. To he who has not, even more shall be taken away. Is more of your understanding being taken away now because you got no faith in Jesus and you've been taught some bull? You've been taught some bull? You've been taught a cock and bull story? And now it's like, whoa, you almost can't even bear to watch my vids any longer because everything that you've been taught thus far is crumbling and you're clinging to it. Why? Let it go. Don't cremate your care. Finally, let some grow up in your heart for once. Let the damnation come off your tongue. Let the water begin to flow. Don't freeze it up. Don't harden your heart. Don't harden your heart. So now, what's being left as a remnant with this original iron, these original sons of God, is those of the living descendancy of their royalty, but yet it's based upon a band, a militant troop, and that would be the Dans, the Judges, the DNA twisted serpent underneath the North Pole, the army of Joel 2. So that's what the iron and the brass means. So now, you can begin to understand a little bit better this picture here, because what we have recorded here is this is not the original descendancy Anunnaki, but I would say that it's a first and second generation. So this is very close to that stump and that root that we see being left as a remnant. Now let's clear something up right here. It's not actually the god Utu Shemesh that is literally handing the scepter off to Hammurabi at that time, because this god has passed a long time ago. This is more or less a stylization depiction of the blessings of this God, which is now being currently upheld within their heart, within their imagination. So then when they render him in record and story, he is brought out in imagery. And in this imagery, they can trace back the gods to the original prince, which would be Enki. And then through his son Marduk, we evolve back to Utu Shemesh. So Hammurabi is not actually receiving any scepter. So it's not actually, I don't know if the time went out. I mean, I don't know what you missed there. It's not actually that he's getting the scepter from actually Utu Shemesh. More or less, it's showing that he's receiving the blessings and the right to rule and the authority because he's been following the rules. He's been maintaining the bloodline, therefore it can be passed off to him. This is recorded and stylized, but that God is not actually there. He is passed a long time ago. So at this point in the dinar, we see the descendancy has basically lost the telltale sign of their connection to these ancient mighty ones of the past, and they tend to look more like the average men because they have become average men. The only thing that makes them different is the knowledge that they withheld, the wealth that they have maintained, and the military might that they impose by force. They're not afraid to do it. But you also have to realize that naturally in the outworkings of the kingdoms of men, regardless of a rebellion of a son of God or sons of God on this world, we still experience the same type of evolutionary progression. It's still not all a perfect world. And there are wars, and there are battles, and there is supremacy, and it is the fittest of the fittest shall survive. That is the natural outworking of all things evolutionary, until that which is evolved has maintained spirit maturity. Then all of that stops, and now we live in a spirit way. And that's exactly what Jesus Christ was trying to say. We stop the force laws that are used to govern mere animals, wild beasts, once we enter willingly into the kingdom and embrace each other as true brothers, true sisters, true family, not joined by a club or drawn from straws or selected by race or blood percentages. That's an abomination of truth. It's not the reality of the truth. That's something that has to be taught, something that has to be learned. It's not something that is, with or without you. We're talking about things that are eternal, that are going to live and be existential with or without you. It takes you joining the eternal to be existential and eternal forever. That's your choice. But never is the eternal going to fade because you don't jive with it. It's the other way around. Either you got what it takes to realize what real love is, what real nobility is, what real honor is, what a real truth is, and when a lie is fumbling out your mouth for your own selfish gain. If you don't realize that that's not the way, then you're basically writing yourself out the book of life. That's the way that it's always been. It's your choice. I choose to live with you, but it's your choice whether you're going to live with me or us, because we ain't going nowhere. Not in eternity. We're going to be in it. And if you want to be in it, then we got to forgive each other. And we got to forget the supposed meaningless doctrine and dogma that are separating peoples. It's not bringing them together. Okay, things have been done. All right, yeah. All right, well, let's get over it and start bringing people together. Do these people not have the potential to learn? Yeah, they do. Let's stop feeding them poison and dumbing them down. Let's stop showing them freaking shows that are making them imitate things that they naturally wouldn't do. And then maybe things might change, right? Do we got to blow up the freaking planet for that to happen? Or do we just join together and begin to treat this peacefully without knocking on the door with a freaking AK-47 in our hands? This is not the way to do it. This is not the way to do it. This is not divine. This is not Christ-like. You're not bearing nothing but your own shame. And you ain't fixing nothing. You're breaking it further when you're breaking the seal. The seal is the dominion of man, and you're seeking to give it to someone who seeks to destroy the kingdoms of men. The stock exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, they are exchanging the stock. They are exchanging the stock from sheep to cattle. Cattle goes to the slaughter. At least the sheep is sheared because it produces and it can live on. It can produce the garments. It can produce the necessary tabernacle to experience the flesh in a spirit way that's led by a righteous shepherd who knows the path. Not some charging bull that is trying to break out the fucking pen. Gosh, excuse my French again. Yes, I'm not perfect. I apologize to any of my younger audience or to anybody that has asked younger people to possibly listen to me, because I don't, maybe rarely now, I have said a cuss word or two here. But in other words, the way I see cuss words is because we always don't have the words to express how we truly feel. There's not the real language that we need. Therefore, we're frustrated when we look to ways to express our emotions in different ways that are not yet expressible with the things they've given us. I don't know. So anyway, this person here is, as a result, receiving the scepter, the rod to rule. As we know, it's also an accompaniment with the shin ring, because these beings are being sealed. Okay? But it's an ancient time in which they are being sealed. It's an ancient time for the original first sealing, but then we see their descendancy after they have reached a certain number and gained a certain populace and have exhausted the potential for them to go the right way. Well, then we see they're sealed again. So this is just really showing the earliest authority is coming from that stump and that root of those original Anunnaki and their first or second generation descendants. So this would be our stump and our root. This would be our top brass. That's what I'm trying to say. And then this is the full fulfillment of Isaiah 34, where they come down. What is this? The Queen of Heaven, right? She's called the Queen of Heaven. She's got her little owls there, stand for animal sacrifice, being able to see in the night. So since they've caused it to be nighttime, they're getting the light from their hidden sun, and then they've got us all blinded, supposedly, what they think is the dark and shadowy other one. Well, it's their God is the one that has one eye and can't see out the other. Blind leaders of the blind, both going to fall in the pit. Come on. Come on. I guess it takes rigorous doctrine to get you to understand that is meaning something else. I guess you got to go through a lot of levels and stages, a lot of forgetting yourself, cremating your cares, and becoming something anew based upon doctrine. He who needs a doctor is sick. I prefer to be healthy. Think about it. Queen of Heaven up here. Then we know that the unicorns and the bulls shall come down with him. If you've already seen some of the videos I've done, there's the unification. That's the Ishtar gate. Ow, I said is Ishtar, right? Well, that's from the Ishtar gate. And then that is a unicorn simultaneously as a bull. Because if you look at the Ishtar gate, you'll see that it's a bull with a twisted horn that has a bull-like tail. And now they've decided to make it a unicorn horn with a horse-like tail, fulfilling the unicorns and the bulls simultaneously. Right? 1 + 1 = 1 to them. Well, I still see 2. I still see it too. So when the unicorns and the bulls shall come down with them, where are they coming down from? Well, heaven, but their heaven, you know, is material. So it's a place that they've created by their own hand, right? Their own material wealth, their own labor. That would be the moon. That would be Shinar. Okay? Coming down from somewhere. Their refuge, that dry and thirsty ground, been bringing a lot of water to it for a long time. Long time. Of course, there's our sevens, and everything else that we see represents the 7 stars of the Pleiades, and also the 7 of the chakra, and also the 7 world age judgments, and a bunch of other 7s. So that fulfill the rest of this a little bit quicker this time. Let me go ahead and read now about the Hammurabi Stela. And as I said, not only are we seeing what's represented as the right to rule, we're seeing what's being represented in the Stela as the way to rule. And I probably missed time back there somewhere. I'm sorry, guys. I still can't get the right app on the phone to where the timing isn't clipping at 10 minutes. But nonetheless, so this stela is what we're going to read about right here, or stela. Let it explain itself, and I'll kind of add in some things where I feel we need to. This is Hammurabi. That is the top brass, a militant king. As you know, let me just add one more thing. The United States is a military-based nation, and if you know anything about the Empire of the City or the Empire of the Black Sun, which would be London, the Vatican, and District of Columbia, and you know that District Columbia is the military might, London is the financial power, and the Vatican is the spiritual rule. Those 3 together make up the trinity of darkness and confusion known as ecclesiastical Babylon in all her factions. They have all unified together to destroy commercial Babylon, which has been created as the new world here in America, which literally means full of race. In other words, this admixed genetics that they believe is grounds for destruction, because they believe is it admixed with the wrong portion, and they have admixed with the right portion, when in reality in Daniel it says the iron was never to mix with it at all, ever. So Hammurabi, king of Babylon about 1700, who issued a famous code of law. His name probably means Hamu, the god is great. The name Hammurabi belongs to the family of Semitic, not Akkadian, personal names, and began appearing in cuneiform texts about 2000 BC. 2 kings of Yamhad, who were contemporaries of the king of Babylon, bore the name. In addition, the name was borne by the king of Kurda and by an official from the old Babylonian period. Prior to Hammurabi, the kings of Babylon had Akkadian names. Hammurabi was the 6th king of the first dynasty of Babylon. He was the son of Sin Mu-Bal-It and the father of Samsu-Iluna. Now think about this here, guys. I just got done telling you a bunch of stuff about the moon and their plan to go to moon and how this connection with the Queen of Heaven is. And then you know Rev 12 is showing you all the astronomical symbols for Virgo, which is in relationship to Ishtar, the exact same. And then within Rev 12 it describes her feet being on the moon. Isaiah 34 puts it in reference to a sacrifice, telling you that they are coming down from somewhere. Well, there's no more hiding it. It's the moon. And if you see channels like Occult Science 101 and a whole bunch of other channels that are starting to pop up, they're all shadow recording my info. Meaning they're taking the info and they're trying to distort and divert it. They want you to think these beings are already here and have been here, so you can believe in this Obama faction presidency having something to do as being the fallen, when in all actuality, they're not. They're about to be the lifted. Fractal complete. As you know, monatomic gold going to tell you the truth, at least if you understand how to see like a seer and not like some blind fool. Okay? So don't be following these blind people any longer, please. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. You know? Don't do it. So, the son of Sin. Sin is the name for the Babylonian moon god. What does Sin mean? It means illuminated. It means shining. Just like Moses at Sinai. Root word for Sinai is Sin. Sinai means shining. Okay, illuminated. And now we have these Babylonian kings showing you where the Illuminati believes its illumination and bloodline has come from. And just like I said, they're symbolizing themselves with the moon because there is darkness that has covered the world. And then they believe they're the only ones that can see because their moon is casting or reflecting the light of the unseen sun, which in reality I told you is their dark and shadowy other one. They would have us believe that it is ours. But it is not, because our God has never dimmed his light in the hearts of the true. Our sun has never set. It never will. Because we're dealing with more than a material manifestation of what a sun is. We're dealing with the spiritual personification of what the sun has done. The true sun. The living sun. Think about it. Think about it, friends. So the next name, father of Samsu-Iluna. Once again, another moon connection. And then Samsu, son of Sam, all the way on down to what we got right here. It just don't stop, right? It don't stop. Where were those killings taking place? I might be wrong, but was it New York? You know? He ruled over Babylon for 42 through 43 years. Is it 44 years? Come on. Is it 44 years? It would make sense, right? Because although we have more and better evidence for his reign than any other king of his dynasty, the precise years he ruled cannot be determined. Well, let me determine it for you. It's going to be 44. It's going to be 44 because it's all been 44, right? Because the Hammurabi Stela just so happens to have been carved in a relief of 44 columns. This thing right here has accompanied with it 44 columns. Is that any secret? When we're telling you that's about Isaiah 34 and they're coming down from somewhere, and then the monatomic gold tells you where they're going up to, the 44% of the gold substance disappears in a brilliant form of blazing light. What is that blazing light called? It's called illuminated. It's called shining. It's called sin. The wages of sin is death. Anybody got their ears on? Hello out there. Lost in space. Come on back in. Come on back down. Come on back home. Don't exhaust it all for some dream that's really a nightmare that you have yet to live. But you might just get your chance. You might just get your chance. So, in other words, they're not exactly sure how long he's reigned. 4 positions are held. The ultra-high chronology holds 1900 BC for his first year of his reign. Probably the most widely held view is that his first year to rule was 1792 BC. Others hold a middle chronology with 1728 BC as his first year. The low chronology places 1642 BC as his first year. All right, now you guys can read all that kind of stuff on your own time. That's where I left off at. You can go ahead and pause here to view that. And this will help your studies out. You might want to do it. I'm just going to show you where I'm going to start reading again. And there's much more there, but I just want to kind of make this a little bit more simple. When am I going to have the next time out here? I don't want to miss this. 50 minutes at 40 seconds, and I'm right at about 50 minutes here. Religion. Scholars assign the famous staged temple tower or ziggurat Itamen Anki to his reign. That Anki is where you get the Egyptian Ankh from. It all has everything to do with the transition from mortal life to spirit as they would perceive it. But as you know, they're trying to live their spirit life here, still in the physical. Jesus Christ said, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom. Their ears are not on. Even though they're supposed to have rabbit ears, I guess when the rabbit's in the hole too deep, you don't hear what's going on. Truly. Okay, so the ziggurat is a stepped pyramid, and I showed you that 44 actually makes a stepped ziggurat pyramid, interestingly enough. The name means the house of the foundation platform of heaven and earth. Baalbek was also in connection to this very same type of location. It was one of the 7 wonders of the world. This giant structure may have influenced the biblical writer in his narrative of the Tower of Babel. Now here's where we get something kind of important here, because you see it described as the house of foundation platform of heaven and earth. Well, rockets take off from platforms. Flying rolls are rocket shaped, Zechariah chapter 5. We got to go back to ancient times, or we got to talk about a place in the Cedars of Lebanon that is connected to Gilgamesh. And then Gilgamesh, I told you, is really who the character Samson is molded and modeled after. Gilgamesh is also famous for rendering and killing young lions and having great strength. Okay, so Samson is really just a story that has been adhered, symbolizing these Dans from where their original mightiness comes from. So the house of the foundation would be more familiar to you, at least types of houses of foundation, when you realize that Gilgamesh actually travels to one of them in the Cedars of Lebanon looking to go up to heaven. And then we go there now in modern times, we find the largest megalithic cyclopean blocks on the face of the earth that are supporting what looks to be a huge platform that has been built on both by the Greeks and the Egyptians. If you ask the Greeks who built it, they told you the gods. These gods would be the ancient gods that you saw depicted in the Iraqi dinar that, of course, were going to and fro, up and down from the moon, Mars, and Earth. And then, of course, once they were brought down, as the book of Amos records, now we see that their descendancy has fought for an incredible amount of time to get back up so that they could fulfill what they were elected to do, and that was genocide for the claimation of land. They were going to lay hold not only on the lands of in and around Palestine, which is now currently Palestine, to secure for themselves. They're seeking to secure the entire earth, the same manner that they secured their smaller lands from micro to macro. Who's ready to tango? Who's ready to tango? Or am I just... I don't know. I don't know what you guys really are thinking. I hope that you're thinking that you're hearing probably the most intact form of connected truth that maybe you've heard thus far. I don't know. I'm hoping that you're beginning to be able to put things together for yourself, where most likely, you can begin to make the connections that are inspired by the mere connections themselves. No longer do you need to be inspired by what I'm trying to show you. You can see that it's already there, and the connections themselves that you currently hold will inspire you to make the next ones. So if it's being influenced, possibly influenced the narrative of the Tower of Babel story, what were they trying to do? They were trying to build a tower to heaven. This fulfills what I told you that they were seeking to do in this Zerubbabel thing, this descendancy of Babel. They have actually built their tower to heaven. The only difference is that it just simply detaches from the ground and goes up like a rocket. So they're there. Hammurabi placed Marduk, a local deity, at the head of the Babylonian pantheon, where he remained for subsequent centuries. Well, no joke, because guess who Marduk is? Marduk is Enki's son, right? So now we see Marduk magically showing up right behind this Tower of Babel information, which is no joke, because now you understand that Israel is bringing a baby in the basket to the moon. And you could relate this naming as Marduk if you like, because it is only the descendancy in which Enki will fulfill through, and Marduk represents that Nephilim descendancy. And this is why you see the obsession with the obelisk, which is really a phallus that's going to explain something that Jesus Christ has said that I'm sure many of you might not understand, that it is easier to bring a camel through the eye of a needle than it is to bring a rich man through the gates of heaven. It's easier to bring a camel through the eye of a needle. Anybody know what that means? I do. I do now. Spirit of Truth always has. That eye of a needle is an obelisk, friends. And the camel that's coming through it has already been told to you. It's already been symbolized to you who that was and who they are and where they're going and what they're bringing. And it's not just water. It has something to do with water breaking. If the water's breaking, it's a good chance it could also evaporate. Lawgiver. This is where we get where I was making a connection here with Ashurbanipal. And you got to realize, guys, I was doing that video at about 5 o'clock in the morning, the last video of the series. I was super tired. I'm really not happy with the way that the last video or even the first video turned out. But I'm going to go ahead and leave them up. I just don't have enough time. The info is there, but my presentation, I'm just tired. I probably should not have said Ashurbanipal Civil Law Code, even though it is connected, and Ashurbanipal did run a civil law code that has been adopted from the Hammurabi Stela. Okay, but I normally introduce at least the civil law code that's connected to what's recorded in the inscription here on the Iraqi dinar, or the relief carving on the Iraqi dinar, with the Hammurabi civil law code. So anybody that's confused, you will understand a little better once I read right here. Lawgiver. In 1898, some fragments were published of cuneiform tablets from the library of Ashurbanipal, king of Assyria. These fragments were thought to be part of an older book of law dating to the first Babylonian dynasty. Now, obviously, that's Hammurabi. In December 1901 and January 1902, in the old royal city of Susa, a diorite stone measuring 2¼ meters high and almost 2 meters in circumference was found. The stone was a relief of Hammurabi with 44 columns of ancient cuneiform writing. The stela proved to contain the collection of Hammurabi laws. All right, and it's got 44 columns. Is that not astounding? You know, I guess we just kind of take it all now with a grain of salt. So this is where the old book of law that you see the fragments that Ashurbanipal was in possession of, they soon find out exactly where it's come from when they unearth the stela that is now being represented to you in portion on the Iraqi dinar. And it's really just telling you the return of the gods. That's what it's about. Their gods. How they're going to do it. Who else thinks they're going to be made a god? When you got to realize, if the serpent is supposed to eat the dust of the earth all the days of his life, well, I told you, man is also dust. And also the men that are eating gold dust. The gold dust men the serpent also eats that too. Think about it.